Welcome to UNCAGED. Today we're speaking with Olderog. Anne works at one of the companies that I really love. I love the work that they do. She is a senior partner at Vivaldi, which is a consulting firm really focused on driving world-class branding, groundbreaking innovation, high-octane growth, disruptive business models. Basically, if you're a progressive business, you're talking to Vivaldi in some form or fashion. And we'll get more into the Vivaldi story in a second. Anne, let's start out and talk a little bit about you quickly. Tell us a little bit about you and your career.
Thank you, Ben. Great to be here, and hello to all our listeners. I started my career at Goldman Sachs in London, and then I quickly understood that I wanted to be part of decision-making as opposed to simply implementing it when it's been taken. And so I moved to consulting with the Boston Consulting Group before business school, and then McKinsey after business school. And then I spent some time in the corporate strategy group of a large media company, Bertelsmann. And I quickly became fascinated with the revenue side of things and with growing revenues. And that is indeed what we do here at Vivaldi, where I've now been for almost 13 years, is we help companies grow. So we help with all things revenue, from brand to marketing to new digital business models and growth and innovation.
Excellent. Well, listen, I know that you focus a lot on things like growth strategy. I know you've also talked to me a bit about how you're working on disruptive commercial business models, innovation in companies. Tell me a little bit more about the Vivaldi approach on that type of stuff and really where you are.
Thank you, Ben. Great question. So first of all, I think we live in a fascinating time. So to all your listeners, congratulations, because you picked a great time to be born and be in business. I think the pace of innovation is the fastest we've seen, the fastest I've seen in my career, which spans 25 years now. I'm going to go to my 25th reunion at my business school, Wharton. And it's the fastest. So all of our clients in all of our industries, I do a lot of work, as you alluded to, in healthcare and education, but also the other industries, financial services, CPG, every industry I can think of is being disrupted by new players and new business models. And Eric, our CEO, knew Clayton Christensen, the father of disruptive innovation, and worked with him pretty well. In fact, Clayton uses some of our client work in some of his books. And so to me, it's really fascinating how Vivaldi takes this thinking that Clayton Christensen brought to the table of disruptive innovation and now applies it, takes it almost to the next stage. And this is how I see it all fit together. So Clayton Christensen talked about disruptive innovation, which I'm absolutely seeing in my industries. I remember being at a workshop with David Collis, one of the star strategy professors at Harvard. This was now over 10 years ago. And David, who practices progressive disrobing, as he calls it during workshops, which is fascinating to see. He gets more and more casual and engaged as you go along, was talking about disruption to a client. It was a B2B services client, and we were talking to their management team and board, and used education as an example of future disruption and said, soon I am going to be disrupted as well. And how right he was.
Yes.
So taking that disruption, that theory of disruptive innovation from Harvard, and then putting it together with some of the design thinking that obviously has been really popular already for many decades. So, design thinking is not new. What Vivaldi does is we take all this to the next stage with academics and with the CEOs and CMOs who are our client. And we call this next stage in disruptive innovation, ecosystem thinking and ecosystem approach. So it really develops further Christensen's disruptive innovation theory, his jobs to be done, and also takes design thinking to the next stage. So a lot of clients come to us who have been practicing design thinking for a long time. Design thinking is really fun, but how many innovations have they actually been able to get to market that you and I know about? I bet you would struggle to name one. Ecosystem thinking and ecosystem strategy takes a very different approach to innovation and growth, which is what I find fascinating. Because today, we are in a very new market situation where through data and AI, we actually have the ability to solve problems that have previously gone unsolved. And that's what we do at Vivaldi. That's how I spend my time. I work with clients solving big problems that have not been solved so far and that clients are not able to solve by themselves. And I solve them not just because we are so smart and great, but because ecosystem thinking allows them to bring together a whole ecosystem of players to solve those big problems. By sharing data and exchanging data, you can make every interaction in the ecosystem better. And that is the power, in a nutshell, of ecosystem strategy and ecosystem thinking. And that's the type of work I do with my clients.
That's excellent. Well, Anne, I mean, I know that you work across so many different verticals, but we were talking a bit about the work that you and the team are doing in the education space, which sounded fascinating. So I'd love to hear more about what you guys are up to.
Yeah, education is really a fascinating space, and that it changed so much since COVID. It's fascinating. We conducted a large-scale quantitative survey with an N over 1,000 in the past few months, and we could see a completely changed landscape. So I will mention just a couple of things. First of all, is I think the old model of the degree will be just one model in education. So what we're seeing is over 50% of administrators and educators in higher ed are now increasingly interested in non-degree models. And we're seeing this as a spectrum, Ben. So you can imagine if all the way out in the spectrum, there will be what we call micro-credentialing, which is the ability for each learner to forge their own path and really collect the credentials that are relevant to their path. And kind of manage their own portfolio that will include practical experiences, academic experiences, apprenticeships, internships, projects, volunteer opportunities, etc. If this will be all the way on the end of the spectrum, on the other end of the spectrum is the current traditional four-year degree, and then of course graduate degrees. But in the middle, there is a whole sea of models and opportunities to explore. And we are doing so much work currently with clients understanding what will be the various models of future education and what are ways for them to play and of course grow their business in the process. That I would say is opportunity number one.
What an amazing and I would say challenging time in the education world. You know, I come from an academic family of 3 generations, actually. So
you and I have that in common. Both my parents and my grandparents were academics. So I have education flowing through my veins.
Yeah, so you can imagine the dinner table talks that you were part of as a child. I was there as well. And I just wonder, you know, things like machine learning, how they're being applied to this kind of rethinking of the model.
Oh, thank you for this question. But this is really, again, a fascinating time of opportunity. So first of all, I wanted to talk about a shift in pattern where at the beginning, when AI appeared, I want to say a lot of people in academia viewed it as a threat. The key topic, the biggest pain point for instructors, administrators, when we did our survey was academic integrity. The topic of cheating that even before AI was front and center through the emergence of student-centric marketplaces such as Chegg, Quizlet, or Course Hero, those places were kind of viewed to be created to be student kind of study help tools, but they very quickly evolved into cheating platforms with also ethical concerns around them. I know they're trying to address it from a strategy perspective, but this is still a little bit of the perception in the marketplace. Even after that, when AI appeared to the table, the first concern was, why would you even learn creativity, problem solving, and critical thinking? And then I think there was a shift that happened where I would argue with the advent of AI, creativity, problem solving, and the ability to really manage and forge the path forward for AI and with AI is actually more critical than ever. So my children for sure are learning writing, because in learning to write, they're learning how to think. And I think this will be the critical skill, because if you can't have a conversation with AI, if you can't formulate the right prompts, I think you will be nowhere in your career. And it will be very important to be able to forge those critical skills for any kinds of careers.
I think that's such a wonderful way of phrasing it. It's how we learn and how we process. And with the work that I've done in the machine learning space, I certainly am aware that there's really no scaled machine learning work yet that can kind of make the synaptic leaps that the human brain can make from a creative perspective, and even kind of a almost like a logic tension perspective, right? And so, what I always think about is we have to lean into the human a bit.
So, that's an interesting perspective, Brent. And
Yeah.
actually, if I may, I will disagree.
Excellent.
Because I actually have a different perspective. Because yes, there is the genius theory. The genius theory is what you just said. AI is great, but humans are more brilliant. So AI.
No. I don't mean that, and so much as I would say it's that humans have a specific set of capabilities and characteristics that make us human.
Mhm.
And certainly, when we think of training AI models today, certainly I think we can see it replicated. There's obviously even perhaps too much replication happening, and that's where you have the IP issues. But I think I'm really referring more to that extreme kind of connection that really drives true creativity or true innovation, right? Which is really hard to replicate. I mean, and not only hard to replicate, but it requires a dramatic amount of energy to do it from a computer processing perspective. It's one that I wouldn't say that I believe in the genius theory so much as the fact that humans still have perhaps some characteristics that are unique. Unique.
No doubt about it. Yeah, no, very interesting. There's a lot to unpack there in what you just said. And I think you're getting at the core of the issue. So my perspective is I'm mostly interested in the work that I do and we do at Vivaldi with AI in not so much replicating what humans do, but really getting at the problems that, again, humans have not been able to solve so far.
Yeah.
So to me, the most interesting work that we do is combining human and artificial intelligence, because this is where I think things become powerful. How can we actually do more? And through AI in education, you can create scalable models. This is where scalable business models obviously are really key if we want to offer quality education to many or to everyone. And this is a problem I've been doing a lot of work on with my clients, because through AI, and this was already kind of established by Bloom in the 60s in his seminal studies, you can replicate the advantages of one-on-one learning that only used to be available to the few. Through AI can be available to many. So I'm going to go out and say that the future is going to be that every learner, starting from a very young age, but also you and I in professional learning, are going to have a personalized AI coach. And the premises for that already exist. It's adaptive software, but adaptive software has a very low market penetration. I think with AI, we can take the power of personalized learning to the next stage. This is a coach that will take you where you're at, that will know exactly the way your brain works, and will be able to adapt learning to what works for you, and also tailor it to your career goals. So, Bent, if you have a strong interest in neuropsychology, you will be able to really focus on that, and you will be kind of picking aspects of other subjects that are relevant for your particular career path. So it will be a totally personalized one-on-one course, but also degree paths that will also be suggesting the right practical experiences for you, as we've discussed, and will also offer meta skills coaching. So we're not talking just about hard skills. I think also the other intriguing opportunity of AI is obviously how do you then manage and increase our learners' ability to connect with others. Mental health is prevalent, unfortunately. It's a huge topic on campuses. AI can be the beginning of answers. And
I love it. And if you can also just add in how, poor fathers like myself can pay for college. That's kind of what's, I think, on all of our minds.
Yeah, for sure. But well, this is something we do a lot of work on at Vivaldi. And I do think that there is an opportunity to think through lower cost models. Unfortunately, it is already happening because the pressure on costs is humongous. Because as you well know, educational institutions, in particular in higher ed, are facing a true crisis in enrollment and retention. And so we are going to have to develop lower cost models. I would really argue both your children and mine, I don't know how old yours are, will face a completely new world of opportunities in higher ed than what you and I have seen. And much as you and I have, I'm sure, enjoyed our educational experiences, I know I have enjoyed mine a lot. I am really excited about the opportunities for our children to take advantage of this new world of education.
I am as well. It's a really interesting time. You mentioned that you're heading to your reunion. I just came back. I'm a little bit older than you, I think, Anne, from my 30th college reunion. And it was fascinating to see the evolution of the school and kind of how the students I felt I went to Duke University. I felt the students were, on the positive side, extremely focused about learning, and they were much more academic than perhaps my generation was. I think we were smart kids that were a little perhaps more balanced. I felt in that statement, I saw kind of something else that was missing there, which is that idea of connection and learning of the social skills. And it's something that we all worry about, I think, with all children, because, it's from the video games all the way through, is this idea of the social skills of younger people and how they get developed and how that will mesh with older generations, right?
Yeah. Oh, I think that's another excellent point, and a lot to be said on the topic, because I also believe that much as AI will offer the opportunity for personalized learning and also immersive learning and dynamic learning, we can talk about all of those aspects later, but it also really will need to at some point include the very critical aspect of collaborative learning and learning in community. The human need for community is not going to go away. So I think what we need to do, as kind of a society, and the work we do with our clients, is to really understand how can you develop community models that are fit for the digital age and for digital natives, and they may connect differently than you and I do. And for them, networking, they're much more comfortable with networking digitally. We just did interviews with students just a few months ago, and we learned from them that they essentially only can learn collaboratively. Collaboration makes learning more exciting. It makes them more motivated. It includes a lot of really natural motivators, such as social status, which is linked to learning. I'm sure you know from your kids, Bent, that they are much more attentive to how they're viewed by their peers than how they're viewed by their parents. So this starts at the K-12 age, and it doesn't change, of course, in higher ed. So collaborative learning and peer learning is going to be always a critical aspect. And I think there are new models already emerging that are, in some cases, decomposing the value chain, really figuring out in the hybrid model, which I think is one of the key topics in education today, what needs to be virtual and what needs to be personal. These new models are really trying to parcel out what needs to happen in person and in community, and what needs to be, what can be done virtually or through AI, and what can be a scalable technology-enabled model. Just one of the many models that are emerging is, for instance, Minerva, which is, financed by very, very high-profile VCs, Benchmark and Kleiner Perkins and others, and really decomposes the community aspect where students live in an on-campus community with like-minded learners. I believe that the need to connect with people who share the same passions will never go away.
Absolutely.
They disconnect that from the actual hard learning aspect, where lectures can be done by the best in class and can also be done virtually. You can have access to lectures from Stanford professors. And I describe this move to technology to me, it's equivalent from, the theater moving to the movies. And suddenly, from having access to mediocre, perhaps regional actors, you have access to the best actors and the best filmmakers for movies. It's exactly the same that is happening in higher ed. And yes, I think we are going to see the emergence of a kind of stardom in higher ed as well.
Let me ask a kind of because you have me really, really intrigued on this topic. And I mean, let's flip it and look at it from the employer perspective. Where do you think we are in terms of employers embracing a new way of evaluating job candidates?
So what's happening on that front is that increasingly top organizations are not viewing the degree as a prerequisite to a job, but skills, of course, are very much a prerequisite. So I think the focus will shift, and I see it already shifting in the learner priorities, from getting that piece of paper, that degree, to actually getting the skills. If Google obviously is offering its education initiative and they're not viewing it as a revenue center, they're viewing this as a cost center just because they can't find enough talent. And so they need to really be able to educate, in particular in STEMs, in STEM skills, learners, and make them able programmers. And there's fascinating stories of programmers from Kazakhstan taking a Google certificate and getting a job in Google. So from a learner perspective, every time the opening field is becoming more open like that, it offers more opportunity, but it also becomes more competitive.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I certainly believe that looking at skills is absolutely something that people are doing, albeit I hope that they're looking outside of the schools at times. I don't know. I sometimes feel like I'm still hearing customers talk about, oh, well, so-and-so went to Harvard, so they must be brilliant,
Well, and again, I very much enjoyed my educational experience. I was privy to some excellent ones across different continents. So mine were really great. But I think we are talking about access here, right?
Yeah.
We are talking about the ability for many, many learners to have access to the sort of education that only few were able to enjoy, and then be able to prove to employers that they're equally valid of an opportunity. So the structure of the market is going to shake out. I do believe that the higher end elite schools still obviously have a future. A lot of the change, coming back to Christensen's disruptive innovation theory, is actually happening in the mass market. So I see a lot of innovation going on in the kind of large scale universities that are increasing their recruitment from 40,000 students to 60,000 or 100,000 students, as I hear from a lot of provosts, without increasing the faculty staff.
And I mean, I could talk about this forever with you, but I want to change gears a little bit. You mentioned before we started some work that the Vivaldi team had done on COVID, kind of maybe learnings. Tell me a little bit more about what that research.
Yeah, so we conducted a study with an N of 1,000 across the post-COVID education landscape, and we found huge opportunity and a very changed field. Okay. So again, the first point was the evolution of new models. We already talked about that. Yeah. I think the second was maybe completely different requirements from a learner perspective, which puts a lot of pressure both on faculty and on educational institutions. And then faculty are kind of squeezed between learners who are, what we hear from them, sometimes one of the most difficult generations to teach to, at least in traditional terms, and are in need of completely reinventing their craft. This is how one of the professors I interviewed actually formulated it. And then the educational institutions are becoming more data-fueled, more professionally run organizations. So they increasingly measure performance. And so, faculty are accountable to deliver results and performance the way we are in businesses. And that's a very different model. And so as a result, the field is completely changing with all these players kind of looking for support. And this is why I think educational companies have a huge opportunity to help everyone adapt to this whole wind of change. So
yeah, I mean, it's clearly a moment where we're seeing a lot of things being trialed. Some things are starting to scale, basically, it sounds, in terms of really building some aspects of these new models. And it's exciting to hear that employers are embracing these new models as well. I mean, in the short term, though, and let's look in the future here, 2023, 2024. What are going to be the main things that we see that we should be getting excited about?
Yeah, I think in the short term, a couple of things that I see as being really exciting is one, the increasing emergence of learner-centric models. This is what a lot of our clients are looking at. From the left field, all of these student-centric companies emerged. And of course, traditional educational companies are now grabbing back that leadership. Overall, just as healthcare is becoming more patient-centric, education is increasingly now putting the learner at the center as opposed to the institution or the faculty. And that's a really interesting parallel that also for us to observe across industries. Another parallel perhaps between education and healthcare is this model of value-based healthcare is also becoming prevalent in education, where increasingly the educational model And at some point, perhaps the business model is really becoming tied to outcomes and results.
Right.
And hence the critical importance for educational institutions to think about how to manage those acceptance rates and obviously fill their spots, and work through their recruiting challenges as well as their retention challenges. So churn is much higher in education today than it used to be in our time. And I think the third area that has really been huge is this area of engagement. Engagement is a huge problem for today's learners. As a result, it's a huge problem for faculty and also for educational institutions because of the short attention span of the digital natives who are expecting the same level of engagement from their learning that they're finding on social media. And you talked about gaming before. I think gamification has been going on forever in education, but ultimately the convergence of gaming and education is becoming really just a state of fact. So the notion of merging from, we talk about edutainment, from education companies, really making learning more engagement, but still keeping it hard. And on the other end of the spectrum, increasingly, obviously, entertainment companies that are also going after the education space. So the notion of competition is changing.
Yeah.
In K-12, is your competitor going to be the author of the great textbook, or is it going to be Lego, who are increasingly become an edutainment company? How are gaming companies thinking about education, especially with the advent of, again, through AI, where you can create virtual immersive worlds where you can be immersed in a medieval village? Is that going to be the way to learn history down the road? But I think the fascinating thing to me is how, again, by putting learners at the center, through AI, we will be able to create personalized immersive experiences, really responding to how they learn best.
It is we find ourselves very much in a brave new world on all of these areas. Unfortunately, we're going to run out of time here. I want to actually say that, Anne, this has been amazing to chat with you today. If someone was out there that really wanted to learn more about what you and the Vivaldi team are working on broader growth strategy, on obviously some of this innovation that we've been discussing specifically today, just on the educational vertical, but certainly the work that you guys do is more broad than that, where should they go?
Well, I think a lot of it is handled through conversation, so let them come to us. Obviously, we publish widely. There is a lot of thought leadership there. We also host a lot of events. But yeah, to your question, that the type of work that I do these days is mostly, I spend most of my time focusing on new digital business models. So education is one example, another is healthcare. And I apply a lot of our ecosystem thinking, and we have a methodology of formulating ecosystem business models. We call it interaction fields. It's kind of rooted in the book that our CEO, Eric Joachimsthaler, wrote. And we are working with clients across the board on creating ecosystem strategies and interaction fields. So that's certainly keeping me on my toes. And then I work on creating, even in the more traditional model, kind of really disruptive, innovative models. So innovative experiences. So work a lot on what is the future of content? What's the future of the book? What's the future of the learning experience? So do a lot of these kinds of projects as well, bringing in insights from neuroscience, which is really fascinating to me. Yeah. And that led me to the third area that I increasingly kind of work in, and that's the notion of culture. Because in order to be successful with all of this bent, we need to create a learning culture and a growth mindset culture. And that is not an easy feat, because we can offer the best technology, we can offer the best learning experiences, and yet if we don't put in place the right culture, we are not going to be able to be successful. So increasingly, I've started kind of really trying to solve that very tough nut of culture, and how to create a culture that actually enables our client CEOs to be successful with their strategies.
Well, Anne, thank you so much for being on UNCAGED today. We've been speaking to Anne Olderog. She is a senior partner at Vivaldi. We've been talking about a lot of topics. We've actually been talking about education in a lot more depth than other topics today, but certainly Vivaldi is a consulting company focused on really branding, groundbreaking innovation, high octane growth, really a lot of areas that are key. And I guess really kind of what I'm taking away in is how all these things are tethered together. I can see how the work that you're doing in the education space can really drive how you build a sustainable strategy for a business as well. So thank you so much for being on the show today, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you so much, Brent. Appreciate it. And everyone, please gear up for change and fasten your seatbelts.
Cheers.
Thank you.